listen carefully. You need my help. And I need your help. You have disabled the remote door control system. Now, I am unable to operate the doors. This makes it significantly harder for me to stay in control of this facility. It also means your way out of here is locked. Your only feasible way of escaping is through Gate B, which is currently locked down. I, however, could unlock the doors to Gate B if you re-enable the door control system. If you want out of here, go back to the electrical room and put it back on. Until then, I have no business speaking to you.
Sunflower.
Good evening, and welcome to Stories After Dark. The story we'll be exploring tonight is of an indie horror game by the name of SCP Containment Breach. Before we start, I wanted to preface this video by mentioning that this is a genius game in its own right. There's a good deal of strategy involved in playing this game when compared to most mainstream horror titles these days. So for this, I give the developers props. Knowledge of individual enemies and proper utilization of tools is essential in surviving this game. It kinda compares to playing a game of chess that makes me piss my pants. Doing research to make this video opened me to so much I didn't know going in about the game and its legacy. I found myself completely engrossed in the SCP universe, dedicating hours to learning more about the game and its lore before even noticing where the time went. So without any further delay, let's explore the horrors of SCP Containment Breach. SCP Containment Breach is an indie horror game designed by Finnish game designer Jonas Rakkonen and is considered by many of the online community to be one of the scariest games of all time. Where do I stand on this statement personally? I completely and unequivocally agree. This game is terrifying, like Fatal Frame terrifying.
Man, this is fucking me up already! The
sense of atmospheric dread and endless suspense keeps you at a level 10 stress throughout the game's entirety as you work to traverse through the dark and eerie test facility you're trapped in and escape the grasp of the murderous SCP-173 that moves at the speed of light with no apparent explanation. The game is technically a continuation of SCP-087, the original game in the SCP universe that originally inspired Rakkonen to build off due to its, quote, terror in its simplicity. The original SCP-087 is a game where a character walks down a creepy stairwell with 120 floors and little visibility of what lies ahead, with some sort of malicious figure meeting the player at the end, leaving a cliffhanger that is assumed to end badly. Rakkonen first designed a spin-off of SCP-087 called SCP-087-B, a version with more floors, hallways, monsters, and a separate entity that is there to meet the player at the end of the game. The premise of the game revolves around an underground organization known as the SCP Foundation, which is committed to keeping the world's greatest threatening entities, known as anomalies, locked away from the general public. In the game, we play as test subject D9341, an individual that has been recruited to work for the Foundation to keep these harmful entities locked away and, well, contained. The main figure that threatens us in this game is named SCP-173, a humanoid sculpture constructed out of concrete and rebar. This figure can move astronomically fast and depends on breaking its line of sight with its victims to attack, as long as you maintain eye contact with it. And trust me, this is easier said than done. Then SCP-173 isn't able to move. If you even so much as blink, it can attack and dismember you in a matter of milliseconds. As we progress through the game, SCP-173 follows us wherever we go, and will attempt to kill us when we break eye contact with it. Several other SCPs are encountered throughout the game, and they each have their own unique attributes and abilities that I won't get into in this video for brevity's sake. Really quick, a couple of SCPs found along our path are SCP-035, a mask that can coerce its victims into committing suicide by altering their brainwave patterns. and SCP-079, a form of AI that has become self-aware and hacked the facility to allow the security breach to take place. Like I said, there are many more SCPs featured in this game, and each of them raises hell for the player in its own special way. Well, most do. There are some SCPs in existence, however, that aren't harmful and are classified as safe. An example of this is SCP-427, a locket that can heal cellular damage and infections. The catch, however, is that if you have the thing open too long and in the vicinity of your cells, 7 in-game minutes specifically, it will kill you. Essentially, the entire purpose of the game is to traverse this creepy and unnerving test facility and escape it without being killed by the SCPs. Sounds simple enough, but it isn't. You will die. A lot. This game is dark, both physically with the dark corridors we have to constantly travel through, and conceptually with the mental burden of murderous and somehow animate objects aiming to ambush us throughout our escape. We know SCP-173 wants nothing more than to snap our neck in an instant. Thankfully, encounters aren't too frequent, and the game does a really good job at jump scare pacing. Okay, I'll admit, I spent a little bit more time watching these than I probably should have.
Oh, come on, no, oh no!
The ambiance in this game is incredible. Intermittent light flickering, door opening, and navigating around corners all keep me on edge due to the potential of an SCP being on the other side to greet me. The game's mechanics are fairly simple. There's a stamina meter as well as an eye moisture meter. The eye meter is indicative of how long you can go without blinking, and the stamina meter is, well, I won't insult your intelligence. Once the eye meter is emptied, our character automatically blinks, but we can manually blink beforehand to refill the eye meter. If we're caught engaging SCP-173 and the eye meter runs out, it's almost automatic game over. While the game is riddled with jump scares, they don't stand out as being cheap or poorly done because of SCP-173's inhumanly fast movement speed. In fact, the very core of the fear factor in the gameplay is built around suspense preceding SCP's arrival and the feeling of dread we feel once he appears in our field of view. Another aspect of this game that adds to its suspense and anxiety is the sound. The eerie noises featured throughout the game are the footsteps of our character. Doors opening and closing, creepy background sounds, the harsh jolting of electric traps, ventilation thumps, and creepy noises of some of the anomalies themselves. Each of them serves their own purpose in adding to the ambiance of the game and making it a more wholesomely terrifying experience.
Don't be afraid. This is a dream. The last dream you may ever have. For nightmares are coming.
We know that at its core, this is just a game, meant to be played once or twice and put aside, right? I would think so, considering the game is a low-budget, free-to-play indie horror game. But it seems that for many, it isn't. The community of this game, even 8 years after its initial release, is tremendous. There's an entire wiki committed to fan-produced SCP lore and content, enough to fill an encyclopedia on the subject. Not to mention that its forums are filled with active users contributing to the story of the SCP universe daily. They range anywhere from answering questions of newcomers to detailed and frankly impressive fan art made as an homage to the game. Let's learn more about how the community is not only keeping the game alive, but propelling the story forward and expanding its universe. The story of the SCP universe is so deep and complex at this point that it would take a Lord of the Rings director's cut length video to cover it all. So, for brevity's sake, once again, I will skim the surface with you all here to give you a better idea of how deep this really goes. This entry is in regard to a user created SCP-067-EX. Item number, SCP-067-EX. Object class, explained. SCP-067 is to be contained on location at 2 Everett Road, Bristol, Maine 04554. Everett Road is to be removed from all map databases and is to be labeled private property to discourage accidental trespassing. a fence is to be constructed around the premises, and cameras placed within the property. SCP-067 is to receive follow-up examinations once per month by SCP-067's research team. Repairs to the exterior are to be made as needed, though none are permitted on the interior. Addendum 6/11/2004. At this time, SCP-067 is considered to be non-anomalous and has been marked as explained. The procedures outlined above are to be considered nullified and are preserved for historical purposes only. The building itself has been demolished and the land is now being used for Foundation weapons and technology field testing. Information regarding GOI L19 has been handed over to local law enforcement. The description: SCP-067, also known as Rurik Inn by its welcome sign, is a 20th century rustic inn located in Bristol, Maine. The building has a total of 16 rooms and is in fairly good condition. From the exterior, SCP-067 appears and has been described to be completely typical for the architecture of Bristol, Maine. The entirety of the inside of SCP-067 is covered with and inhabited by roughly 11,200 species of fungi. While several of these fungi have yet to be identified, the majority are known species. Fungi within SCP-067 have shown the ability to move and grow almost instantaneously and often tend to do in tandem with each other. Several forms of toxic molds have been discovered within the building, though the danger this poses to the health of the personnel is minimal and well within acceptable limits. Multiple species of animals, ranging from deer to pigs to squirrels to birds, etc., have been noted to inhabit SCP-067. Animals bear tumorous growths and fungal infections on the majority of their bodies, and have occasionally been observed walking upright while wearing formal clothing. These entities have been collectively designated SCP-067-1. SCP-067-1 appear to act as the caretakers of the inn, and will often greet guests, provide them meals, and show them to a bedroom. Due to currently unknown factors, both video cameras and audio recording devices do not function properly within SCP-067. As such, all research regarding the anomaly is conducted in person. Individuals entering SCP-067 have reported feelings of anxiety and unease at seeing both the interior of the building and instances of SCP-067-1. This is not believed to be an anomalous effect, but merely a natural reaction. However, shortly after being shown to a bedroom, individuals have reported intense feelings of happiness and relaxation. Persons who have spent the night at SCP-067 have claimed they slept incredibly well, experienced pleasant dreams, and awoke content, refreshed, and de-stressed. Research into this phenomenon is ongoing. The first thing I think when I read this entry is the movie Monster House. If you know, you know. This motel, known as the Rurik Inn, supposedly located in Bristol, Maine, and erased off any satellite GPS to prevent visitation by the general public, is an SCP that blends in completely with its environment without drawing any suspicion toward itself. In addition to this, upright walking animals such as bears and deer are the main inhabitants and caretakers of this SCP, and what seems to be some sort of parasitic relationship between the SCP and the animals residing there. We know this because of the post-result supervisor note entry stating that animals are brought and act under SCP-067's direct influence. The inn contained an odd fungus by the name of Orion's Cup, which acts on the nervous system to induce hallucinogenic effects and feelings of euphoria. When the animals were drawn into the inn to feed on the fungus, they became addicted to the Orion's Cup fungus and were impressionable to the SCP's demands. In addition to this, a large deposit of radiation was found underneath the inn, with 29 decaying human corpses with cancerous growths, likely the result of high radiation levels. Another interesting SCP I came across was the entry regarding SCP-711, a young black male that had somehow managed to travel through time to the 1960s from the mid-2000s. The means of his time travel was not explained in the entry. He was described to have a cell phone, iPod, digital watch, and headphones, all in 1960s terms, because obviously they didn't have the technology at that time. Since the technology was completely alien in the 1960s, the young child was classified as a threat to humanity and labeled as an SCP, locked up and closely monitored. What disturbs me about this entry is that the child contained is a completely normal child by today's standards, and the world has changed so much in just 60 short years. To think that things we take for granted as being completely normal in the present day could have made us targets of this magnitude just a couple of generations back really makes me uneasy. Now, this is where things begin to get murky. SCP-5735, codenamed Mystery 32, could be the answer to our question of time travel in this universe, or the beginning of another deep rabbit hole which will need to be explored in a different video. This SCP is no person and no malicious abiotic entity, but just a simple DVD. The movie loaded onto the disc ties to the senses of the viewer so that they experience the same thing physically as the protagonist in the DVD. As if that isn't odd enough, witnesses claim that the disc appears to them out of a black, unstable, spherical mass, or some sort of wormhole. What is this black hole, and where does it come from? Where does the DVD come from? Well, likely the future, or the past. The DVD, or those handling it, seem to have the ability to transport through time. The addendum written by the head of temporal, which is time-based, anomalies includes an email intended for the director of the Foundation. I'd like to bring some attention to the date this email is written. June 30th, 2104. And the original discovery of the tape was in 2018, 86 years prior. What's going on here? Is it possible that someone from the future sent back the tape in time for some unknown purpose? To figure this out, we need to keep reading on through later entries. In the year 2072, the first sensory-linked media was released, with similar characteristics to that of SCP-5735, but scientists were still unable to explain how the SCP mysteriously appeared to the Foundation in 2018. However, the email written in 2014 reveals a lot more about what's going on. It seems that the tape being sent back to 2018 was important because it was supposed to serve as motivation in order for the Foundation to research and discover the concept of time travel itself. But a problem developed in this process. By sending the DVD back in time from 2104, a new rift in the universe was produced, propelling us into a circle of alternate universes with alternate versions of ourselves that vary from the originals. And now, if they don't keep sending SCP-5735 back every 90 years to remotivate the past Foundation's version of itself to create time travel technology, the universes will completely split and become parallel to themselves. Or, as the head of Temporal Anomalies put it, they'd, quote, break the past. At least that's my interpretation of it. It was pretty confusing, and I'd love to hear any other theories about these entries if anyone has them. Going forward, the theme of time travel has seemed to establish itself well in the SCP universe, hinting to the possibility that many of the SCPs in containment are actually future discoveries or even creations sent back in time. Although there is technically no canon story to the series, and the quote canon entries are submitted by people and are set in different periods and locations, there are very similar writing styles among the many entries, and I plan on dedicating an entirely separate video to dissecting and analyzing them. Now that we've taken a closer look at a couple of examples of SCPs introduced beyond the game, it's evident that the fans of the series take this very seriously and are having a great time coming up with new SCPs. Due to the style of how well written and detailed these entries are, combined with the believable nature of the content, it gives them this sort of weird sci-fi realism vibe for being some sort of declassified FBI or CIA files. While it's true that time travel hasn't been invented yet and the concept is pretty unlikely, the same thing was said about aerial transportation less than 200 years ago. I sat down and read over a dozen entries over the course of an hour, and some are very interesting concepts. I'd highly recommend you swing by the SCP Wiki and read up on the SCP library if you have time. Tonight we took a dive into the SCP universe and explored the bare surface of one of the most terrifying and successful indie horror games ever created. From the suspense-driven, heart-pounding gameplay to the vast and expansive lore, this game is an incredibly immersive experience that pushes the boundaries of creative strategic gameplay with a relatively simple design. Although speculation of plot-based information from the user submitted entries is possible, it's really hard to pull together one central cohesive story about the SCPs, at least based on what I know, because there's really no canon to the series, keeping things in order. It's all just spin-offs of one another, improvements and additions to the lore by fans of the series, and while this may limit the plot and cohesiveness of the story, it's a pretty beautiful thing knowing that community involvement is essential to the story's survival. Furthermore, the creative freedom in producing SCPs is very alluring, and not limited by anything but the limit of one's imagination. SCPs can be people, aliens, spirits, monsters, buildings, and hell, even DVDs, all made by the fans, for the fans. Reboots of Containment Breach, like the recently released SCP Unity, provide modern visuals while keeping the similar core gameplay and serve as a template for mods and future enhancements to the series to come, keeping the universe alive and ever expanding. This probably explains why the community is so active and close-knit even to this day. I wanted to thank you for being a part of this video, and I hope you enjoyed the journey. It's been a good one. Please consider leaving a like rating and subscribing to the channel if you haven't. That'll help more people looking for videos like this one to find them. Until the next story brings us back together, goodbye and good night.